Food is something that, to be honest, most of us have not thought about much nowadays. Most of the time, we just try to get golden carrots, and that's it. We just thrive off of them. Or maybe sometimes you have a hogwood farm, and you use pork chops instead. But that hasn't always been the case. The food meta used to have been much more diverse, and this has only been a relatively recent development with the introduction of 1.14 and 1.16. So in this video, I will show you the history of how my food choices have evolved on Ocraft and how that has compared to the different metas that have evolved with it. Now note, before we get started, I do have a cold right now, so if my voice sounds a bit off, that is why, but let's get started. When I started playing in 2014, there were unfortunately no videos, and my memory was very foggy in this aspect. Although from piecing together memories and the earliest recorded stuff I have, I can get a kind of a picture of it with a tiny degree of confidence. But with that disclaimer out of the way, let's get started. Before the world reset, I was in a snow biome. This has caused some decent restrictions because it would be harder to get things like melons or pumpkins, or also mobs don't spawn as often, and also there's less grass for seeds. But this wasn't much of a problem as I took a very different approach. First off, I've always hated killing passive mobs. It's just, I don't know why, it's one of those things that I just don't like doing in Minecraft, at least directly. Although this was especially the case back then, so basically, that has forced me to go on a vegan diet, except for one food source that we'll get to in a second. Also, I didn't even need the seeds, or whatever, carrot seeds, wheat seeds. I didn't need any of that, because I decided to use a bit of an alternate food source. Rotten flesh. Nowadays, you would only eat as a last resort, and even at the time, relying solely on rotten flesh was absolutely crazy. And at first, it didn't seem like a bad source, as it regenerated 4 hunger bars, and saturation wasn't really a thing back then. But due to it being rotten, it obviously had to have a side effect. And that would give you the hunger effect, which will basically make it so that you lose that hunger quicker, which means that you'll regen less. So despite it being really common and whatever, it was still probably the worst food to have at the time. And that is why it was kind of unusual for someone to rely on it at this point. Although at the same time, it wasn't anywhere near as bad as it is now. But as I mentioned, despite all these cons, there was one massive benefit, and that was abundance. It obviously came from zombies, and you basically could kill zombies at any time. So you basically would have never have to worry about running out of rotten flesh ever. My thought process of the time was exactly that. Why worry about wasting time getting a better food source if I could just get a decent one by just playing the game? And this continued throughout the whole old world, nothing much developed, although there is an honorable mention. I found 2 pigs despite the scarceness, and I started breeding them. With them, I decided to start my very first business, which I came up with. And it was absolutely genius. Absolutely mind-blowing. Eggs for cobblestone. Yes, you heard that right. I was selling pigs to get cobblestone. I am not making this up. I also had accessories that you could use with the pigs as well, such as saddles and carrots with sticks. I sold the pigs 5 cobblestone each, the carrots sticks 3 cobble each, and the saddles for 7 cobble each. And by the way, I am so glad that none of the saddles ended up selling, because that is an absolutely rotten deal on my end. I also got a carrot by killing one of the zombies, which was how I was able to make the carrots with sticks. Although at the same time I did not harvest them much, as I didn't use it as my main food source. I just used it for those carrots with sticks, maybe occasionally a few more to stash away. When the world reset in 2015, I moved to a small underground base with my brother. Nothing changed much. Some carrots did survive the world switch, as the only things which were kept were in our inventories, but I did not decide to plant it yet. I decided to solely rely on rotten flesh. I also returned the pigs for cobblestone business, with the prices all being the same. However, due to the introduction of Minecraft 1.9 and saturation, relying on rotten flesh became even less viable than before. Even though I realized this, during the first few months in the underground base, I did not learn my lesson. I was struggling to survive, all due to the refusal to obtain any other food source that would take some time. However, I would eventually learn my lesson. This will finally click when in late 2015 and 2016, my brother and I split from the underground base, and I moved to where I am now. The location of where I put my modern base was mostly over the ocean with the front of it on the tip of a peninsula, which was probably what caused me to click, as I could reliably fish for food if I wanted to. I even turned one of my jobs to earn money into a fisherman, due to the ease of fishing. Not only that, I also replanted my carrots near my dock as a backup, and even planted a tiny bit of wheat seeds to breed cows and sheep. This improved my quality of life drastically. The fish and carrots made a massive difference. Now I didn't have to worry about not being able to regenerate, and I could also sprint a lot more. I started out fishing, but I realized that it took too long and resorted to carrots instead afterwards. This was also not unlike how people farmed food at that time, as automatic farms were not well known back by then, so they would either grow crops, raise animals, or if they were near an ocean, they would fish. Another honorable mention that I'd like to point out are potatoes. Now, looking back, I actually was kind of surprised about this because there has not been much evidence of me growing potatoes despite me growing them on a lot of different worlds. Now, I'm not exactly sure why. Could be that I just didn't get them until very late, some bad RNG in that way. There could have also been some other reasons, like maybe I just didn't want to smelt stuff. Even at like 2019, when I was noticeably very resource poor, I still didn't have a coal issue, so potatoes could have easily been sustainable as well. Another theory though is that maybe I had fire aspect on my sword, and each time I killed a zombie it would give me a big potato instead of a regular, so I couldn't grow it. Over time though, however, due to most likely sprinting more, taking more damage, and harvesting less, the carrots I was relying on became less and less consistent. I did have to move my carrot farm and completely get rid of my wheat farm, which did give me a few more carrot crops, but it wasn't enough. But in 2018 or 2019, the food meta has evolved to be more automatic methods. Even though I was not very aware of this at the time, most people were. Things like guardian farms were new, alongside newly popularized ones like chicken farms and gold farms, and because of this, many people not only had enough food to feed themselves, but also much to give away. Because of that, the community chests were full of all sorts of food. But one person who was most likely farming for heads was putting, strangely enough, a lot of mutton into the community chests. And I mean a lot. Felt like every time you need more, there would just be a few stacks in the chest. Now, at one point even, I found 11 stacks of mutton just lying around in them, which due to being on easy mode and me not having to move much outside of my base, lasted me an eternity. I rarely even needed to eat carrots anymore, as the community chest were supplying me with more than enough, and this trend will continue until my 4-year break. When I came back, I knew that the mutton I got from the community chests will last me a little bit, but armed with new wisdom, I knew I needed to change something. I knew that I could not just rely on the RNG that came with people's donations. I also was not only just looking for self-sufficiency, I was looking for excess to help others in need. So in 2023, I was expanding the main building of my base a lot, and I decided to add my first solution to the problem. I made a giant greenhouse on the second floor, and inside of it was a grub that I hinted at before, one that I've used on a lot of other worlds, but not necessarily on here. Potatoes. I also added the new campfires at the edge to nullify the need for fuel. This was a massive upgrade from what I used to have here. There are now 56 crops, all properly irrigated, compared to the 12 before. It also was completely insulated, making the problem of mobs trampling non-existent. Even though it was low due to the place being over the ocean in the first place, I made the shift from carrots to potatoes for a few reasons. One is that even though carrots aren't bad, in more recent worlds, the saturation wasn't really enough to hold me in the long run and only grew them early on. The second is that the extra saturation would mean that I need less harvests to sustain myself. The third reason was that they were more valuable to put in community chests, and the fourth was due to campfires kind of getting rid of the need for fuel, which was one of the drawbacks of harvesting potatoes, despite you still needing the time, obviously. Now, armed with this new greenhouse, would that be enough to finally get me self-sustaining? And it was! The upgrade was massive. Even though I didn't necessarily have enough to constantly fill up community chests, I still had way more enough to be self-sufficient, even in times where I am doing very hunger-intensive things such as building underwater or fighting just a lot of mobs. It also helped that partially due to me playing for a long time, I don't need best foods to be happy playing the game. So even though I wasn't so developed at the time, I didn't mind eating potatoes at all. I didn't want to set for satisfactory. Like I said before, I wanted to strive to be like the people before me and provide for others who will develop in the future. And for months and months, I spent meticulously planning one of the few areas of my claim with nothing on it, which I wanted to do for many years. And with that, food was one of the top priorities. I was going to have an entire island where I would have my villagers, and alongside that, a lot of farms. There will be a future video where all of the specifics of the island and the lore will be documented. But this island, going under construction and taking around 6 months to finish completely with intermittent breaks, not only did it have all of the villagers I was allowed to have by the server, it also had automatic crop farms, carrots, potatoes, and now wheat again, but also an automatic chicken heart farm. However, the latter was an inefficient design and was more for the feathers. So why exactly did I switch up the crops I was growing again? Due to the fact that I was automatically farming them now, I wanted to completely omit the process of using a campfire to smoke my food. So I wanted to rely on wheat now because crafting is much easier to do than smelting or campfiring. It takes a lot less time. And then use the other crops, the carrots and potatoes, those will go into villager training. The thing about wheat is that bread has the same saturation as potatoes, and you have to craft them instead of smelt them, which took next to no time. But to compensate, it was nowhere near as efficient on a per crop basis as either potatoes or even carrots. In past worlds, I've not grown wheat very much due to the large amount of land being required, but now that I have that available, I figured that it was the best way to go. The end result was not to the extent that I wanted it to, although it was still good enough. I was not solely reliant on bread, but it helped me a lot. And it kind of made it so like I was half reliant on bread, and then the other half I can still use potatoes. Having villagers also meant that I could get much stronger foods reliable, such as golden carrots, chicken, and pork chops. However, I actually decided not to rely on those instead. So I actually threw them in a community chest instead to help people out that way. With the villagers I had 2 farmers and a butcher, which was how I was able to get all 3. And each restock I'd get with the villagers, I'd get 72 golden carrots, 80 pork chops, and 128 chicken. And since all of them were cured, these were extremely good deals as well. And that leads me to today, where food is practically overflowing. I have dozens of stacks of rank bread and potatoes, which I eat both alternately. I also have lots of emeralds from the trading I did, which I spent a lot of the excess ones buying the even better ones to put in the community chests. The trading and donating I try to do regularly, but has more resulted in me just donating when I felt like it. Even so, that has resulted in me getting a lot of appreciation from other server members, especially newcomers, as I try to aim the donations at them. 2 more things I want to note before I end the episode is that I know this was more of a boring history of video. I released it now because I felt like it matched perfectly with the valuables one I already had. And the second thing is that if it wasn't for the food quest I've been doing on my other Forever World, I probably would have never made a video like this. That reminded me of how food used to work on past servers and SMPs, which was how this resulted. And in that regard, I don't want to spoil too much, but I want to somehow incorporate the lore with food on this world to the other and vice versa. Anyways, back to the video. From eating rotten flesh to growing crops, and from relying off of others to being way more than self-sufficient, to the point I could give to others. The history of how my food preferences on Minecraft evolved over the past 11 years was definitely a fascinating story. And if you agree and want to see more, make sure to leave a like on this video and subscribe to my channel. Make sure to share it to others and give me any feedback I can improve on. And of course, if you dislike the video, make sure to dislike as well. Also means a lot. And with that out of the way, I will see you guys all in the next video. Peace out!